Alrighty, so I've been reading some of your comments from the quizzes from this week. So I want to try to help clarify with a few vocabulary. So we come back to rational and irrational numbers. Like, it gets kind of confusing. What are they, right? So in the big scheme of things, we have the family of all the real numbers. Okay, and inside all the real numbers, you've got decimals, you got fractions, you got positive numbers, you got negative numbers, you've got numbers that can be expressed as a fraction, numbers that just keep on going forever and ever. So in this family, kind of like, in our class, we have our class of 25 students, and in that class of 25, most are 10th graders, some are 11th, a handful are seniors. So we have different grades. Same thing with the family of real numbers. Inside the family of real numbers, you have some numbers that are nice. They can be written as a fraction. They repeat, that's okay, but we can see the pattern. We can see the end. And then there's another family. They don't mix. They're called the irrationals. So irrational. Sometimes people think of them as the irregular numbers, the crazy numbers, that just keep going on forever. So for example, like I was saying, the nice rational numbers are numbers like 1, like 2, like 1/2, like 1/3, believe it or not. You can have negative numbers like -4. You can have big, humongous numbers like 1001. So there's lots of rational numbers. But the thing is, they can be expressed as a fraction. And even if you have like a regular good old-fashioned scientific calculator, I have to have one of these because you guys know I teach part-time at SUNY Broome. I'm not allowed to use the graphing calculator, so neither are my students, right? So we use these kinds of calculators. So remember, you can type in fractions. We have the 1 divide by 2 to show 1/2, right? That's 0.5. 1/3, 1 divide by 3, 1/3. See, it's 0.3 repeating, but there's a pattern. We call those rational numbers. But unfortunately, there are some numbers that don't have a pattern. That just keep on going forever. Those are the irrational numbers. Kind of like, my goodness, this is really dating me, but I remember when I first started learning how to drive a car, I used to have regular gas and unregular gas, leaded gasoline and unleaded gasoline. But now we all know we use unleaded gasoline, unless you have those fancy cars that require diesel. But it's one or the other. So think of this as true, false. Okay, so if you're not a rational number, you're an irrational number. Now, everyone talks about the number pi as an irrational number because when you type pi in your calculator, which is neat, on this calculator I use at BCC, I actually have a pi button. Just a little infomercial. If you are going on to college and you ever have questions about your calculator, ask your teachers because a lot of them know that in high school you use this. It's a little bit of adjustment, so don't be shy. Ask. But the pi button over here, as I type it in, see this number? 3.14159, blah, blah, blah. It goes on and on and on. It's hard to write that decimal as a fraction, okay? So that's a classic example of what we call irrational number. But then we discover, wait a minute, Pythagoras, in fact, I wasn't alive back then, but there's all these stories that he was poisoned to death because he discovered there's these weird numbers like square root of 2. If you take the square root of the number 2, here we have it, we get this big long decimal, and we approximate it, right? We oftentimes ask the teacher, hey, Mr. Kandars, to get round to the nearest 10th or nearest 100th or nearest integer. But when you see this, that's a classic example, irrational. So irrational numbers are numbers that cannot be written as a fraction, just keeps on going forever. But be prepared. I think some of you had some questions from today's the quizzes I sent actually yesterday. I was reading some of your comments. I threw in some perfect squares, like the square root of 16. Just because it looks like it's irrational doesn't necessarily mean it's an irrational number, right? You know, just because you're in my math class, don't assume that you all are 11th graders. Some of you are 12th graders, right? So square root of 16, if I type this in the calculator, We'll make a revelation. Oh, it's actually 4. So what did I do? I mixed in an old PEMDAS problem. Something old still is something good, okay? So don't judge a book by its cover, I think is the saying. Hope this helps clarify the difference between the rational and irrational numbers.